There's been a lot of talk about thematic investing over the last several months, perhaps even the last few years. The question is, what is so important about thematic investing and how is it different? We'll talk about that and much more coming up on this episode of the Cocktail Investing Podcast. All right. Welcome, listeners. Welcome, news listeners. It is once again time for the Cocktail Investing Podcast, where we distill everyday noise into clear investing signals. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Versace, Chief Investment Officer at Thematic Research, and joining me, as always,
Lenore Hawkins, Chief Macro Strategist.
That is right. Now, Lenore, this is episode 56, and the only reason I'm calling out that number is last week in episode 55, we put the spotlight on you and what's important about global macro. And if I remember, because I lost the towing costs, it means it is my turn to be put under the microscope this week.
Payback, baby.
Payback. So let's get the usual housekeeping stuff out of the way and just get right to it. So the housekeeping stuff is, of course, we ask you to go over to thematicresearch.com, check out all our wares. You can see Lenore's weekly wrap, something you should be signed up for because it's a great summary of all the key events of the week that happened. The Monday morning kickoff, if you want to start the week off right, as well as our premium products. And of course, you can take a look at past episodes of the podcast or simply sign up for them on iTunes or SoundCloud. Now, Lenore, with that out of the way, suck it to me, as Goldie Hawn used to say. By the way, talk about showing your age right there, huh?
Sock it to me?
Come on, stop. Even you know that was the big Goldie Hawn line on Laugh-In.
Actually, I did not know that.
Oh, jeez.
I never watched Laugh-In. I wasn't really allowed to watch TV growing up, so I'm missing out on quite a bit of references.
You probably didn't eat Crunch Berries either as a kid.
Oh, God, no. That was like the work of Satan in my family.
Well, all I can say is that's another reason to think that why I'm going straight to hell.
The one thing I could pull off was every now and then I could sneak a little ho-ho or a ding-dong. Was that it?
Ho-ho or ding-dong? Hostess?
Yeah, I loved those.
I was a hostess. I was hostess.
I loved my little ho-hos and ding-dongs. Still do. Some things never change. So
go ahead, but before let's keep this conversation above the gutter and just move forward.
So, Chris.
So, Lenore.
This time I get to put the spotlight on you.
That is correct.
So let's start off with, how did you ever end up in the world of investing?
You know, that's a fantastic question because I double majored in math and economics, just like you did in college. And afterwards, I backpacked through Europe for 7 weeks, did not worry about getting a job upon returning, and I wound up teaching at my high school. Iona Prep in New Rochelle, New York. And I was teaching math, as you might imagine, along with some computer science classes. Nothing by today's standards too revolutionary or breakthrough. But I remember reading Peter Lynch's book, One Up on Wall Street. And this is a true story. I was reading it and I'm like, wow, I just devoured it. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And I started, buying a couple stocks here and there. And then I knew I wasn't going to teach forever, right? I figured I'll take my GMATs, I'll go back to business school. So as I was getting ready to do that, I was sitting in the math office, no joke. I picked up the phone and I called Fidelity and I said, can I speak to Peter Lynch, please? And they said, hang on one second. Phone, here, picks up, Lynch.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding.
You've never told me this story.
Yeah. So I get Peter Lynch on the phone. I said, oh, Mr. Lynch, love your book. Fantastic. Oh, very insightful, very interested in breaking the world of investing. What can I do? He said, kid, do you have any idea how many calls I get like this every week? Click.
Oh.
Yeah, so that really wasn't.
I was thinking that was going to go in a very different direction.
Well, obviously, I was hoping that was the case, but that's when I kind of stepped back and said, "All right, let me get into grad school," and I did, and I went to Fordham School of Business, now the Gabelli School of Business in Manhattan. I wound up getting a job in equity research at Salomon Brothers, where I wound up working with this guy who was the number one institutional investor ranked analyst for machinery capital goods. And, at the time, I did not like working for him because he embraced the Socratic method like nobody else did.
Ooh, that can be painful.
It was painful, but to his credit, and I over the years, I came to understand what he was trying to do. He was forcing me to think for myself rather than follow the herd. And as you know, as we talk about, one of the big mistakes is doing just that, following the herd. You need to let the data talk to you. So a lot of that I really got from this guy, Dave Snyder, who I could not do what I do today without having worked for him.
So how then did you start moving towards this whole idea of thematic investing?
That is a great question. So I started in Salomon Brothers and then worked my way through DLJ through a combination of machinery, capital goods, home building products. And then I left to become an analyst on my own, live in the hot seat down with Friedman, Billings, Ramsey, or simply FBR. And this is right around the time, 98, 99. You remember those days where nobody cared about industrials, home building, and all this other stuff.
.com. All you had to do is be like icecream.com.
Icetea.com.
Walkmydog.com.
Yes. So I had to reinvent myself. And I and a couple other guys, we work in FBR, which was at the mouth of the Netplex, as they called it on the East Coast. And we said, look, everything you guys do in the tech practice, right, is from, it stops at the server, essentially. So we were like, what are the key technologies that get this stuff, out? Yeah. So we were talking about wireless, we were talking about wireline, fiber, blah, blah, blah. And I actually got started looking at display technologies. So in 2000, I wrote the first very comprehensive report on display technologies, talking about, LCDs, LEDs, and even back then, organic light emitting diodes. And I was very bearish on them and talking about how long it was going to come to market and all this other stuff. Lo and behold, I was right. But I had to reinvent myself. And I did. And I wound up covering the entire mobile phone ecosystem, right? From, Motorola's, and I'm going to mention some names you might remember. I'm not sure everybody listening to this will in the mobile phone space. So Ericsson, Motorola, Nokia, Research in Motion.
Little tiny Nokias.
Hey, don't make fun of the 3310. So all of those, and then to their semiconductor suppliers. So the Qualcomms of the world, at the time, Texas Instruments, Skyworks, Alpha Industries, RF Micro Devices, and others. And then, other building blocks. So I had the entire food chain built out. And it was pretty wild and kind of different. So that's really where I learned that aspect of our buy the bullets, not the goods, and the importance of getting information up and down the chain. But over time, I became very frustrated with seeing ripple effects happen and only being able to do something in a very small window, a very silo, which, as you know, if you look at Wall Street research, it's all about the sector. And that ultimately gave rise to my thought that, sector investing is dead. Because we can trace these pronounced ripples and implications across sectors, and we can see headwinds that are coming from different sectors. So,
well, maybe part of that too is that we have these sectors. I mean, one of the things that frustrates me when people start talking about sectors is sectors now don't have the meaning that they had, like the same sector, right? Because things have changed. The technology has changed so much. So when you're talking about like even something as simple as production of food. Production of food today occurs in a very different way. I mean, you still plant, but the process.
Well, that's true. That's true. Although not as much. I hear a lot more about hydroponic meat. So I'm a little worried about that.
But all of it has just changed so much. And yet we still have sectors haven't changed. They haven't evolved.
No, they have. They have. They
have.
Remember, S&P added an 11th sector known as REITs, right? So it's not 10 anymore; it's now 11. But no, I'm kidding, of course. But
hold me.
Yeah,
the excitement.
Shudders. But your point is taken that it's very much an outmoded way of looking at, I would say, the world, but certainly an outmoded way of looking at investing.
So what is it about all of it, though, that really got you so excited when you started going down this path?
I think, like any person who follows the stock market, or maybe somebody like yourself who really likes to dig into the data and see the implications of what's going on and try and line it up. It's a lot like, kind of like being Batman, in that,
Okay,
Batman is
his
known.
favorite character.
He is my favorite character, which probably means I'm stealing a question from you later on. What I was going to say about that, though, is, forget the movies, but if you read the comic books like I did as a kid, one of the taglines was the world's greatest detective, right? And investing and putting the pieces together, it's a lot like detective work. Because you've got to understand, who benefits. That's always the first question. And what is the data lining up? What is the supporting data points? What are they telling you? Okay. Again,
Okay.
a lot of what we talk about.
So then how about you walk us through
Oh,
one of your favorite, like one that worked out really well, one of your favorite detective plots where you were finding, you went and found something that no one else was really looking at, and you were able to do it using the thematic lens.
Oh, geez. There are so many, and there's unfortunately no one that jumps out at me. Let me see if I can work it through with one of our themes. How about that, right? So one of our more pervasive themes is the connected society, right? I don't think anybody would argue with that. Whether it's the migration towards online shopping, online content consumption, how we stay in touch with people, how and where we consume content, that is probably one of the most dramatically
and in the ways that we have more and more of our lives have become sort of datified.
And sold, thank you, Facebook. Yes,
Yeah,
that is exactly
that's
right.
a topic right now.
Yeah, exactly. So when we looked on that, I would say going even back before I was at Thematica, I would say it was using those themes to really understand. This is probably back as far back as 2002, 3, I think. And what was expected to be at the time, as Nokia put it, and I'll do this in my best Finnish accent, the mobile internet. What they were talking about with that, and realizing, what was going to happen in terms of data consumption, what it would mean with not 5G like we talk about now, but just 3G that was coming out, and the need for more bands and stuff like that. That's kind of what turned me on to companies like a Skyworks Solutions, for example, or some others. But there's all sorts of aspects to look at this, whether it's the aging of the population that we have that gives rise to older people needing more healthcare services, but we've got a nursing shortage as we look at the data. So that was one of the companies, AMN Healthcare, that kind of flew below the lines. And I have to give you a little bit of a hat tip for that, because you were pretty instrumental in identifying that company. But I was able to put that to work because of that. So, it takes a village.
All right. Where has thematic investing ever gone wrong for you?
Oh, where has it gone wrong?
Because I would imagine that you can see the themes, you can find the company, but as I say, timing is everything. Yeah,
timing is everything. And I guess there's two instances. One is there are times when the stock have peaked out and you've got to listen, to the tailwinds to make sure that the thematic tailwinds that they're still blowing. And sometimes they are, right? And sometimes they are not. Okay. Mm-hmm. When they turn, then you kind of have to know to get out. But so you really have to continue to mine the data, right? As we wrote in Cocktail Investing, the book, this is not crock pot investing. You don't fix it, forget it, and never come back. But we're not traders either, right? We're what we call active investors, because we're constantly paying attention to the data that's coming in. So the biggest example of one mistake was probably not being on top of the data as best as I could have been in hindsight. Yeah. The second one, and this is one that I talk about with you in the book, is imposing what I want to happen on the data. And you remember this because we were debating this. This was back in the housing market. And I was saying that I thought that at the time the housing market would rebound because there was a dearth of inventory out there. If I remember at the time when we were...
you and I were really debating that one.
Yeah. And I think at the time it was something like there were less than or about 4 months of supply for single family homes. And I was saying, this will be a positive for housing starts. This will be a positive for the home builders. They've got to get supply back in demand. And at the time we were starting to see prices start to climb, right? Which is, something that we would say now is kind of a pain point for our cash-strapped consumers, right? So, but I was insistent. No, I've seen this before. It will happen. And it didn't, right? So I was wrong. But you know what? It's
And that's where macro comes in.
That is where macro comes in.
Thank you, softball pitch. That's kind of where a little bit of a macro layover kind of helps, because you can take that step back and say, okay, well, has the environment changed?
Absolutely.
There's something very different in the environment. And actually just today I was reading about how housing starts are at a 60-year low.
Yeah, I think you probably saw the same copy of the Wall Street Journal that I did.
Yep.
But it's you mentioned the macro overview, and let me just recap what the thematic perspective is. The thematic perspective is looking at the shifting landscapes of economics, demographics, psychographics, which is how, where, why people buy, technology, and we also look at some regulatory mandates and a few other things. So just to bring it all the way back, it's that shifting landscape that gives rise to change, forces businesses to change their business model, maybe because consumers are doing something a little differently, maybe businesses are doing something a little differently, and you can identify companies that are responding, riding that thematic tailwind, and others are not, and they're going to get crushed. You want my favorite example of a tailwind and a company, or a headwind and a company that got crushed?
Sure.
It's real simple. It's a device that everybody used to have. It's the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Right. They did not. Yep. They did not respond to touchscreen. They did not respond to the.
And they were the must-have. I mean, they were. It was a no-brainer.
They were so addictive too. And I remember seeing people. I remember once seeing one.
You mean crackberries?
Crackberries, yes. I remember seeing one CFO after a meeting with him. He's standing there, no joke, at the urinal, ticking off his email. One-handed. One-handed. Yeah, I know it's gross.
You need that visual.
Sorry. But and that was obvious and coming. But there are other ones too. Like we've seen a lot of pain in retail over the last 12 to 18 months. Very easy to spot, given a combination of things. On the global macro front, looking at rising debt levels, the aging of the population, the need to stretch what disposable income we have. And a variety of other things that, it's just very obvious what was going to happen to brick and mortar retail from our perspective anyway.
So walk us through how you've identified, give us an example of one of the investing themes and how kind of you identified it.
Let's go with the cash-strapped consumer. I say that because it's probably among the number that we have, probably one of the most easy, but it blends a lot of what we both do. So when we look at the cash-strapped consumer, the thesis behind it is that consumers were seeing their disposable income pressured. They would need to trade down, in other words, stretch those dollars. And it could have been like going to the local grocery store, whether it's a Ralph's or a Harris Teeter or a Wegmans or whatever, and buying store-bought brands. Mm-hmm. It could have been going to Walmart, stretch your dollars. Costco, stretch your dollars, right? So that was kind of the genesis of it. And then over time, and then with the debut of Amazon Prime, Amazon, of course, came into this because you would no longer need to go to the store. It just comes to you. It's fantastic. That's the tailwind. The headwind is who gets hurt in those environments when consumers are not looking to spend or can't spend. Right. Mm-hmm. So you start to think about higher end retailers, Macy's, for example, it's been wonderful for Macy's over the last 2 years, hasn't
it? They've really enjoyed this.
Yeah. All the way down to Target and some others.
Maybe a little Toys R Us.
Oh, well, Toys R Us I just wrote about this last week. Toys R Us was another victim of really two things. One is, Amazon moving into toys. Right. I mean, there's other competitive factors there too. Walmart, Target are in toys as well, but it's really Amazon that's been the big disruptor. But when we think about our connected society and our content is king themes, right? We take a look at the toys that kids are playing with today.
That's different.
Yeah. They're not playing with my G.I. Joe, right? With the Kung Fu grip. Right?
Yeah, it's a really different. You go to a restaurant now, and you used to see that's a great example because it's one of those ones how you and I always talk about. These are easily observable. One of the the most important things about this thematic investing is that you can see it everywhere. Go to a restaurant, look for the family sitting there with their kids, and the kids aren't sitting there playing with toys.
No, they're sitting there watching a screen, watching a movie, or playing a game. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You can find confirming data points for thematic investing. I would say anywhere and everywhere. And that brings us all the way back to the Peter Lynch book, right? Which is he was investigating his wife and her friends at the shopping mall. And that's how he got turned on to legs, which were at the time, I think, like a pantyhose or whatever. He talks about this in the book, right? I'm not making this up. So he talks about it, and it turned out to be like a home run for him.
Yeah, he was following his wife and her friends and got turned on to legs.
Legs the pantyhose. Thank you. Thank you. Now that you say that, I totally hear it. I totally hear it. Totally hear it. Legs the pantyhose. Sorry. That's the beautiful thing. I can still put my foot in my mouth.
All right. So what have you found is most challenging when you're looking at the world through a thematic lens?
What is most challenging? That's a tough one. Most challenging. I think, there is no most challenging. I'll mention several things. There's so many companies out there, and the ability to, turn them over and sometimes find the right one can be a little challenging. But when you do, it's like magic, So for example, and this really gets to, this is a better way to answer it. It's making sure that you cast the net for the theme wide enough in terms of addressable companies, right? So I mentioned AMN Healthcare before, right? Mm-hmm. Another one for our fattening of the population was not one that would get you fat, for example, like a Yum Brands or a McDonald's or something like that, or PepsiCo, sugary beverages and salty snacks, but it's understanding what some of the headwinds are or the pain point beneficiaries are, right? So if we're thinking about fattening a population, rising costs of obesity and health, well, it also gives rise to diabetes, right? And then there's a company, ticker symbol PODD, Insulet, I believe is the name, and it's understanding that this is an automatic pump that regulates insulin levels in your body. And so it's a fantastic thing. So I was just mad at myself that I didn't recognize that sooner, because the stock's it's been a home run. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the probably one of the most frustrating parts of it, is making sure that there's so many companies out there, ones that are going public, or ones that are changing their business model. You do have to stay on top of that.
What advice would you give to somebody who has been trying to implement this kind of thematic way of looking at the world and they've been struggling?
Well, there's twofold answers. My first answer is going to be
one is shameless.
Yeah, one is shameless, and it's exactly what you did last week when we were talking about understanding global macros. So the first one is, subscribe to Thematic Investing, the newsletter, and see what we're doing. Listen to the podcast. The second one is do what we do, right? Which is be voracious readers. Everything from newspaper articles to magazines to books to 10Ks, looking at investor presentations, right? Listening or reading to the transcripts of company conference calls, and always looking for what the inflection is or the change is, but also too, get out, be around people, observe, see what they're doing, see what's changing, what are people buying, why are they buying. It's almost as simple as, in the past, everybody's going to Whole Foods for organic food, and then walking through your own grocery store and noticing that, wow, the amount of shelf space for organic items or for water or other things, that's changing in here. Notice the kind of snacks that are showing up, right? Again, that's just one example. Or notice how big are the lines outside of Starbucks or Costco. Right? Take a look at where people are going, watch the human condition, understand the human behavior, and that'll get you on your path.
What do you think most people in this industry get wrong?
Well, I'll start off by saying that the stock market is probably the most humbling of things on the planet.
Oh, I hear that.
Right. It's important because it's important after, having some success, whether it's, as we like to say, knocking it out of the park with a company that is, doubles in stock price, or just a number of strong movers, 20%, 30, 40%. All of a sudden, the biggest danger is shortcutting things, right? Yeah, I know what this is. I got it. or not checking the data and not really understanding what a company does. So kind of shooting from the hip, as we call it. To me, that is the biggest mistake, and that really speaks to ego more so than anything. And that's why I said the stock market humbles all, good or bad, even Bill Ackman.
Even Bill Ackman. Oh, he had a tough go. Yeah, it's I think probably the single most dangerous thing to have in investing is, and we've all been guilty of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Is to have your pride get involved.
Oh, yes. Yeah. When you know something for sure, it is dangerous. And that brings us back to a great book, Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove, which was not about investing, but it's applicable.
So I hear you really like soup.
Everybody loves soup. It's warm and comforting on the during winter days.
I'm
not sure what you're getting at.
I hear that there's some sort of video that can prove the degree to which you really enjoy soup.
I do know what you're getting at. I think you're referring to my days as a street actor in New York doing a totally impromptu soup commercial for Progressive Soup that ran, I want to say, in the early 90s. Might be.
And how did you end up at a Progressive Soup commercial?
I had lunch down in Little Italy, got off at Columbus Circle, walked up Central Park West. Person was asking some questions about, do you like soup? I put my hand up. I said, yes, I do. Would you mind answering these questions over here on camera? And one thing led to another. And of course they were, do you like Progresso soup? And I said, oh, I eat it all the time. And the truth is, I did eat it all the time. The truth was, my grandmother never made soup. So I might have said, tastes like my grandmother used to make, maybe kind of, sort of.
Oh, you big phony.
I was
shameless.
I was selling at the time. Because I kind of put the data points together, and I was like, I understand what's going to happen here. So,
yeah, I love your soup.
Well, and I know. I mean, truth be told, if I went to the cupboard today, there would probably be a can of Progresso soup there, probably Chicorina or Italian wedding ball.
Oh, and the other thing that people may not know about Chris is
are you bringing Springsteen into this now?
No, I'm leaving the boss for the moment. Is that Chris also is? My nickname for him is the Professor.
Oh, that's because I teach. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into that?
A friend of mine is a guy named Bernie McSherry, who is the dean at the New Jersey City University School of Business, and we had known each other from when he was a floor governor at the New York Stock Exchange, and he asked if I would come up to the school and do a presentation. And I said, sure, happy to do it. And I was supposed to speak for about an hour. And as you could probably imagine, I blew right through that. I spoke for probably somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours. And, it was great. I was kind of in full form. This was before, when I started teaching, which you know that I do, of throwing chalk, swearing, and walking on desks. But it was a precursor to all that. And I mentioned when we were done, we went out to dinner. I said, well, it's fun being back in the classroom. And they were like, you were in the classroom? Because I taught 2 years of high school as I started with in the beginning here. And I was like, boy, wouldn't it be fun to get in there? And that just gave rise to going back to doing that, which I do have fun with. But it also allowed me to interact with students at the Student Investment Management Club. They actually manage a real pool of money. And it allowed me to build the NJCU New Jersey 50 Index, which is a barometer of the New Jersey economy, and one of the first indices that we've published here at Thematic, or I should say contributed to here at Thematic.
Well, you brought it up. So, favorite musician?
There's really no choice there. It's as they like to say, it's the hard rockin', earthquaking, booty shaking, Viagra taking, legendary E Street Band, who of course is fronted by the one, the only, Mr. Bruce Springsteen. Now you're going to ask, how many times have you seen them? I'll give you the answer. 50, as in 50. I have seen them 50 times since 1984. Have they ever disappointed, you might ask? Never.
Interviewing is pretty easy.
Yeah, well, I kind of wind up and go. But no, I mean, if I would just say this, if he and his music have been there through great times, through bad times, and no matter what, there's always a message that gets you through. That's what I like about it. And the other thing I love about him, other than the fact that no two shows are ever the same, is that he gives it his all every time.
What is it? You're always saying that when you're giving me the like, leave it all on the stage, leave it all out there.
I don't think I've said that. That doesn't sound like me. But
yeah, I said something like that.
No, I don't think so.
Leaves it all out on the stage.
No, I don't think.
Empty, or is it empty the tank?
Empty the tank. That's it. That's it.
Yes, empty the tank.
Yes. Springsteen. Yes. Said a different way. Springsteen empties the tank night after night, and there is nobody better. And the guy he's going to be 70 in a few years, and he's still playing for 4 hours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome. So I encourage anybody who has not seen him, you have to do it.
And of course, this is cocktail investing.
Favorite cocktail?
Favorite cocktail.
You know, it's funny you said that because I was thinking that she's going to spring this one on me because it's like one of your go-to questions when you have to interview somebody on there, or we're interviewing a third party on this. Well, no, I know. And I was going to go with this one drink, but then I was out over the weekend and I had another drink. So the drink that I'm thinking about is a combination of watermelon-infused vodka, lemonade, and muddled watermelon. So that is actually what they call at this place. It is called the Patio Pounder Lemonade. And it was unbelievable.
That sounds pretty refreshing.
It was great. It was tasty. It wasn't too sweet. The only complaint I have is that the muddled watermelon would from time to time get caught in the straw.
Yeah, that is a problem.
I know, which is why you don't use the straw. You just drink it.
No, just go straight down.
Any other things you want to pry from my head before we get out of here?
I think we're good.
I think we're good. All right. Well, Lenore, thank you for turning the microscope and being far more gentle on me than I probably was on you. I did, I cheated a little bit with the Inside the Actor Studio questions. I will tell you what my favorite word is, though.
How about your favorite cuss word?
Yeah, it's the same as yours. So if you want to remind us what that is, that'll be great.
Yeah, no.
Favorite word? Favorite word?
Yeah.
Sunshine.
Aww.
Because it evokes. It's a new day when the sun comes out, and they tend to be rather hopeful. So it's all good. All right. Anything else?
That's all for now, folks. Have a great rest of the week, and thanks for tuning in. And if you wouldn't mind, we would love to get your reviews on iTunes or wherever it is that you tune in. We'd like to hear more from you, and please subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a great week.